Yeah, we are live. You can start.
Okay. Good morning to everyone who is attending this meeting. I am Prakriti Ramurthy and my co-host is Anjali. We're both from the research activities team at Squad Medicine and Research. And today's session is going to be a roadmap to research, which is a very informative session about all the aspects regarding undergraduate research and how to go about it. And to take the session is Dr. Pracheth. He is currently working as an associate professor in the Department of Community Medicine in Yenepoya Medical College in Yenepoya, Mangalore, Karnataka. He also holds additional responsibilities like in charge faculty of Urban Health Training Center and NSS program officer at the institutional level. As a principal investigator, he has received funding for research from various agencies like the ICMR, the Union, and the State Task Force, National TB Elimination Program. He has been the co-investigator for research projects founded by agencies like the Tata Trust. He has won numerous awards, including the Best Paper Award in conferences at international, national, and state level on 9 occasions. He has also received the Good Teacher Award in 2018. He has 28 publications in peer-reviewed indexed impact factor journals. He has also reviewed manuscripts for eminent journals like BMC Pediatrics, Sage Open Medicine, and PLOS ONE. He has authored one chapter in the IAPSM textbook of community medicine. He has presented 24 papers at conferences and has been invited as a resource person or judge for conferences and academic programs on 76 occasions. He has also played a significant role in organizing nearly 20 academic programs, which includes conferences, workshops, short courses, and CME programs. He has coordinated more than 160 extension activities. He has been a member of various committees at the institutional level, like the Academic Council, Scientific Review Board, Phase-wise Curriculum Committee, to name a few. He is also the convener of the website committee at the college level. We welcome you, sir. Thank you so much for taking this session. And over to you, sir.
Thank you, Prakriti, for that introduction. So at the outset, I would like to thank Squad Medicine and Research for inviting me over for this program. Tarun, Anjali, Prakriti, and all the other members of this Squad Medicine and Research. I'm grateful to you guys for inviting me over. So please allow me to share my screen first. Yes, I hope you can see this. So it's nice to spend a lazy, what would have otherwise been a very lazy Sunday morning constructively. So again, as I told earlier, I'm grateful to you guys for inviting me. So today we would be speaking about roadmap for medical research. So as the target audience here are undergraduate medical students, so I'm going to focus on what an undergraduate medical student can do in terms of research. So I would like to acknowledge my workplace, that is Yenepoya Medical College, Department of Community Medicine, and the Union for this particular presentation. So what is research? It is said that research is what I'm doing when I don't know what I'm doing. So do we all believe that research should be something that is unknown or a new discovery or something that is path breaking or something that is earth shattering? Do we all believe that research should always be new? So I'm going to tell you over the next 1 hour or so that research need not necessarily be something that is always new. It need not necessarily be a new discovery or a new invention. So we all do research as a part of our daily lives. What is our experience when we do research? So we do research. All of us are into these shopping apps, right? These e-commerce portals like Amazon or Flipkart, and you name many more. So we always are on the search. We are always researching for a product. It could be a smartphone, it could be a laptop, it could be any other electronic gadget or any essential requirement of ours. So we also look at various documents on web. We do that as a part of our academic life. So we can also research stuff on social media, Instagram or Facebook or Twitter. So I can I find I can always find my old friend from school on Facebook or Instagram or any other social media platform. So we do research day in and day out in our daily lives. So the specific learning objectives of this particular session include to explain the various steps in carrying out a medical research project and to describe the various processes involved in disseminating the research findings. So it's not enough if we just carry out a research project and just say thank you very much, bye bye. No, we need to tell this to the scientific community, right? So we need to disseminate it to the others. So I'm going to tell you about this in the next 1 hour or so. So this would be the contents of my presentation. Why medical research? Framing a research question, which I believe is the heart of a research project. Types of research and study designs, parts of a research protocol, principles of data collection, how to manage data once we collect it, how to enter it, how to analyze it. And once we are done with a research project, how do we tell this to others, or how do we disseminate the research findings? And what research funding opportunities exist at present for Indian medicos or Indian medical students? So this would be the outline of my presentation. What is research? There's a joke which goes like this: why is it called research when it's your first time searching for it? That is incorrect. So what exactly is research? It is the knowledge which is acquired through reasoning, through intuition, by using certain appropriate scientific methods. So we make use of some methods to gain some knowledge. That is research. What is the main purpose of research? The main purpose or broad purpose of research is to discover answers to questions by applying some scientific procedures. So we apply science to discover answers to a question or a problem that has bothered us from a research point of view, to find out the hidden truth that may not have been discovered. Each research has a purpose, a broad aim, and there are specific objectives. Okay, so research is to discover answers for questions. Why is it that we need to do medical research? Why medical research? It's a part and parcel of our academic career right now. Of course, for postgraduates who are doing MD or MS or DM or MCH, all of them need to mandatorily carry out a research project, what we call as dissertation, and they will have to submit it to the university. Only when the university clears it, they are allowed to sit for the final university examinations. So it's like a hall ticket. It's as important as a hall ticket for them, right? Not just that, there are many people who do PhD. Okay, even after MD, there are many people who go and opt for PhD. So for them, research is like bread and butter. So they need to undertake a thesis, a research thesis, complete it and submit it. Only once they have cleared, an examination where some experts would evaluate their research project, they are awarded PhD. So it's a part of certain degrees. Now it's also a part of our undergraduate medical education, which is a step in the right direction. I've put this up in bold. Research is now a part of undergraduate medical education. Earlier, it was not the case. Okay. Research is used to be mandatory for physiotherapy, for nursing, but not for medicine and dentistry. But now, thanks to the competency based medical education, CBME, which was introduced by the National Medical Commission in the year 2019, now research is an integral part. It's one of the competencies in the subject community medicine. Of course, many of the departments in India, many good institutions in India, including my workplace, we've been training medical undergraduates in research from many years. We've been doing it for the last 6 to 7 years. And as a part of their first clinical posting in the third semester, early in the second year, we take 1 month of research posting. That is, we mentor or we train the undergraduates about how to actually undertake a research project successfully, and then they are made to carry out a research project under the guidance of a faculty, and then submit a report. Only when they submit a report by the end of third year, okay, they, if the report is found to be satisfactory, only then they are allowed to give their third year examination. So many of the universities or many medical colleges have done that, have taken the step even before CBME or the competency based medical education came into existence. But now, thanks to the National Medical Commission, our undergraduates get to learn research methodology. It's a part of the curriculum now. So it's a part of our degree. So that's why medical research is important. Okay. Career. Once you become a faculty, it could be any subject. You could be a neurosurgeon, you could be a plastic surgeon, an obstetrician, pediatrician, or community physician like me, or an anatomist. What determines your promotions? It's not enough if you're good, in your daily work. Of course, that's your bread and butter. One can't say that being a surgeon, I will not do operations. I do not do how to, touch the patient. I do not want to touch the patient, get my hands dirty. Let me just do research full time. No, that's not the right approach. Apart from our routine work, we are also expected to be proficient in research and carry out research projects. Okay, only if we have a certain number of publications in peer reviewed journals, we are promoted to the next cadre. Not just that, now again, thanks to the National Medical Commission, research training has become mandatory for medical faculty. So, as a medical faculty, I need to undergo something called Basic Biomedical Research course, which is conducted by the Indian Council of Medical Research, named mostly the National Institute of Epidemiology, which is a unit of the ICMR. They conduct it. It's an online course which all faculty need to go through, clear the examination. They need to submit assignments, clear the examination. Only then they are eligible to be promoted to the next level. So that has become made mandatory by the National Medical Commission, which I believe is a step in the right direction. Not just that, postgraduates have to do it during their 3-year post graduation. They have to undergo this particular course, basic biomedical research. So there's some research that is getting into their head, into their gray matter. So that's a good step. So it's a part and parcel of our life now. We can't say that, okay, let me just see patients. I'll just take some classes nicely and I'll go home and sleep. No, we need to be doing research in our free time. We are expected to do that. Our administrators question us, why haven't you done research? Why haven't you published papers in good journals? So we are also questioned. We are also being evaluated based on research. But having said that, it should not be a compulsion. We should not do research only for the sake of compulsion or sake of our career. We need to have that intrinsic passion in us. Many of us derive joy from solving unsolved problems. There's an intellectual joy that we get. Okay, I've done something in this regard. Oh, this research question was bothering me. I've done something. I've done my bit. I've done my bit for the community. I've done my bit for my subject. It's like a service to the society. Now we have vaccines available for COVID-19, which wasn't the case in the first wave. So, how do we know that these vaccines are effective in terms of reducing mortality and severe disease? That's because some solid evidence is there in the form of research. People have taken the pain to carry out research projects or clinical trials or vaccine trials to determine the effectiveness of these vaccines. Okay, so it's like if it comes out well, it may be a service to the society. We get some respectability. People who are good in research are always valued by institutions, by organizations. Okay, so why these are the various reasons why we need to do medical research as doctors. It's an integral part and parcel of our career, of our daily life. This is something that we all need to accept. But having said that, we need to plan, right? Just like before we appear for an examination, we study, we slog hard, right? We have a plan with us, we have a timetable. We also need to have a timetable here. We also need to have a plan. Otherwise, it could get too stressful. You could see some gray hair on my head, right? Two or three. That's because of research, because research could be stressful. Okay. If we do not, you know, think about the various challenges that we might encounter, if we are not well planned or well prepared, that could lead to stress and anxiety. So it's very, very important to plan our research. And now I'll be telling you the basic steps of research or medical research as such, which I believe every undergraduate medical student doing MBBS should be knowing. What do we do first? The first step here is to identify and define the problem, identify an idea, analyze the need, review the literature, search the matter, which could be there in the internet or it could be there in any other source. Determine the significance of the problem, how big a problem this is. Suppose I see that, okay, uh, mortality among young patients, I'm talking about COVID again, because we are all, suffering. We have all suffered a lot because of this particular disease. So mortality among young patients who have been diagnosed with COVID-19. So this is something that bothers me. Why are we losing young people? So that is just an idea. So that's just an idea that has hit me. So I need to analyze why this particular study is important. Why is it important for people like me to carry out research in this particular area? Take this idea forward. What would I do next? I would review the literature, look at various journals, published stuff on that particular topic, or it could be a book or any other document. Determine how big a problem this is, the significance of the problem. Formulate something called a hypothesis or a research question. So I'll tell you the difference between hypothesis and a research question later, but this is a statement or a proposed explanation based on some little evidence that we have. It's like a prediction basically, which we can prove or disprove by carrying out research. Okay, so we also need to identify what are our variables. What is the main variable? What example that I gave you, the main variable or what we call as outcome variable is mortality among young patients suffering from COVID-19. Then we have something called predictor variables or independent variables. What are the other variables that could be associated with mortality among young patients having COVID-19? It could be comorbid conditions like diabetes, hypertension, or immunosuppressants or immunosuppressed state like cancer, or it could be thyroid illness, or it could even be lack of health seeking behavior, lack of COVID appropriate behavior. So all these could be independent variables or predictor variables which could be associated with the outcome or dependent variables. So we need to categorize all these. We need to think of these variables well in advance before we actually go out there and get our hands dirty and do the data collection, right? So this could, we may have to review literature extensively, sit with experts, consult our seniors and other colleagues, brainstorm, and then come up with these variables. So it's a teamwork at the end of the day. I can't say that, okay, I will do research individually. I am a one man army, I can do it alone. No, we need to collaborate. It's a team at the end of the day. So here I would be concentrating more on literature search, because this is one of the initial steps. So if we search for literature extensively, if we know the right methods involved here, okay, then we would be able to do complete justice to the topic or the idea that has hit our head. So what do we do here? So in literature search, we identify the existing research and information that is available about our chosen topic. This is very, very important when we draft something called an introduction or background section of a protocol. Many of the universities have a separate section called review of literature in a protocol. That is when this becomes this, we need to identify what is the existing information that is available about our chosen topic. What is the current state of knowledge? What has been published? Let me take that example only, mortality among young patients with COVID-19. What studies have already been carried out? If I refer it online, I'll be able to get it. What are the gaps? I can study all these literature that is available and find out what has not been covered, what I can include here, how I can improvise upon whatever that has been done elsewhere. So it should not be a copy paste. I told you that research need not be new. Yes, we can replicate whatever that has been done elsewhere, but ideally, we also need to add something new in our methodology. Some component that was missed in the previous studies, I'm adding it and I'm giving this to the community, or it's like a service to the society. It will help the, mankind as well as medicine. Okay, then we also need literature search to draft something called discussion section of a manuscript. Once we complete the research project, we need to go for publication or presentation. That is when in a manuscript, in a scientific paper, discussion is very, very important. So we can synthesize the conclusions from various past studies and we can use it to draft the discussion section of our manuscript. Okay, so that's why literature search is very important. What is literature search? It's a systematic approach. It's not something random like, Googling something. Okay, Google some word, COVID-19 deaths among young population. No, it should be systematic. There are programs and courses available to train faculty as well as doctors on how to carry out literature search. It's not something that is very straightforward and easy. So it's a systematic approach to identify, to retrieve, and to manage the studies usually that have been published. So we can either use published studies or some conference proceedings that are there online or some documents or websites. So it is considered to be the most effective way to locate evidence on a research topic. It's very effective if we do it the right way, systematically. So there's also something called literature review. Literature review means analyzing, evaluating, and synthesizing or combining the scientific evidence derived from studies through the search process. The outcome of a literature search is something called literature review, wherein we go in depth, we analyze, we evaluate, we look into each of these studies, we read the abstracts, we see how they have done the study, what is the finding, what is the conclusion, and we synthesize the evidence gained from the various studies. Okay, so literature review is the next step after literature search. So we need to search literature first, then we review the literature that we have got in our search. So where do we look? We have various databases. Thankfully, we have computer in front of us. Earlier, think about 30 to 40 years ago, our senior teachers, when they were doing a post graduation or when they were young faculty, computer wasn't there. They had to go to the library, look into various journals, manually search. They didn't have any of this PowerPoint or computers, no typing. They had to use a typewriter, so it was quite difficult. Computer has definitely helped us. So we can look into various databases. We have search engines like PubMed, we have Scopus, we have Web of Science, we have Embase. Okay, we have Google Scholar as well. We can also do manual searches of online journals. I can look into various journals in my specialty and see if any study has been carried out in the topic of my interest. I can also do manual search of references of certain key articles. I can also ask experts who have some standing in the subject or in that particular topic in that area for studies that have been completed and forthcoming. And there's some material available online. For example, I can get to know what are the various clinical trials that have been carried out in my topic of interest. I'll be able to find it online. There's something called CTRI database, Clinical Trial Registry of India. I can always go access the studies that have been initiated that are ongoing. So all that is there in public domain. So I should not restrict myself only to published articles. I can also go through some other references, websites, documents, and even the studies that have been completed and ongoing or forthcoming. Okay. So this literature search as such is another 2 or 3 hour session. Okay, how to learn how to do this? There are various courses available, okay, wherein they teach how to actually search literature, how to do a PubMed search. This is an area where even I have some expertise in. I've also carried out training programs on how to carry out a PubMed search effectively. Okay, but this is another topic. I just wanted to give you an overview. There's something called literature search, which is the initial stepping stone for any research. And then we do a literature review. We'll be able to identify gaps that are there in the existing research topic or research area of our interest. Okay, what do we do next? So we have done some basic literature search, literature review. We have identified that the study is very important for us. This topic is important. Okay, what do we do next? We plan the research. We formulate objectives. We select our study population. We need to have an inclusion and exclusion criteria. Who are our study subjects? Whom are we going to include? Whom are we going to exclude? We need to choose an appropriate research design. And then we need to decide how we are going to collect the data, the method of data collection, and what next. Once we collect the data, how am I going to safeguard that particular data, manage it, handle it, process it, and analyze it. So this is the next step wherein we plan for the research. So now I'm going to tell you what is the single most important aspect of a research study. It's like the backbone of a research study. It's not a protocol as such. It is as simple as a question, research question. That research question is considered to be the most important aspect of a research study. Well begun is half done. A question well asked is a question half answered. The way the question is stated shows that what data will be necessary to answer it, and how and from where or from whom the data will be obtained. So it needs to be very explicitly framed and defined. A research question. A question well asked is a question half answered. So how is a research question different from a hypothesis? Research question is actually a question that the research intends to answer. It is more inquisitive in nature. We ask questions, right? For example, will a psychological intervention be more effective? A counseling intervention be more effective when compared to the usual standard of care in reducing depression among pregnant women who are seeking health care in a medical college or tertiary care hospital. So this is a research project that I've already undertaken. So whether a psychological intervention wherein we give some counseling, will it be effective when compared to what is the usual practice or usual standard of care in reducing depression or mild depression? Let me make it more specific: mild depression among pregnant women who are seeking healthcare in a tertiary care hospital. So this is a question that the research intends to answer. The same thing, if I put it in the form of a statement, a supposition or a proposed explanation based on some limited evidence, is called hypothesis. This is considered to be the starting point for further investigation, which we can either prove or disprove, accept or reject a hypothesis through research. It's more of a prediction in nature. There may not be enough scientific basis to say that this is the correct hypothesis, but we may have to carry out research to either prove or disprove it. So it's a supposition, it's a prediction or a proposed explanation based on some limited evidence, maybe some review of literature or some studies that have already been carried out on this particular topic, or maybe a pilot study, okay, a small study that we ourselves have done to see if this is actually feasible or not. Based on that, we can make a hypothesis. Not all studies have a hypothesis. This is something that I want to tell you. An example for a hypothesis would be a psychological intervention would be 10% more effective in reducing depression among pregnant women seeking healthcare in a tertiary care hospital when compared to usual care. So you can see the difference here. Earlier, I asked a question: will it be effective? Here I say that yes, it will be 10% more effective when compared to the usual standard of care, or what we call as treatment as usual, which is routinely practiced. Okay, so this is how we frame a hypothesis. It should be complete in all aspects. It should tell the uh, person who is looking at this hypothesis that what is this research all about, where are we carrying out the study, what is the source of data, right? All that information should be given them. Okay, a research question or a hypothesis should be complete. A well asked, again I'm repeating myself, a well asked research question is like half the battle won. So how to know if the research question is actually a good one? We make use of a criteria called as finer criteria: feasible, interesting, N for novel, E for ethical, R for relevant. So that is finer criteria. So let us see one by one. So first of all, the first letter in finer, F, stands for feasible. It should be feasible. We should be able to do it, you know, without too many difficulties. It should be possible for us to accomplish or carry out the research project using this particular research question. So what do we see under feasibility? Okay, we should be able to get adequate number of study participants. Okay, adequate number of study participants should be available and willing to participate. If I have a research question on a very rare disease which is not that common in India, then feasibility becomes a big question mark, right? So we need to see whether it's actually feasible. Second part is adequate technical experience. Do the investigator, as I told you, it's a teamwork. We have the principal investigator and the others members of the study team or co-investigators. Do the investigator and the co-investigators have the skills and experience to design and carry out this particular study? Are they competent enough? Are they well trained? Are they experienced enough? So we always evaluate a research team as a whole, not an individual. So our entire team should be capable of looking after any of the challenges that might come in this particular research project. So do we have adequate technical experience is number two. The third aspect of feasibility is it affordable in time and cost? We need to be realistic. We can't be very, very ambitious. Okay, so whatever we have proposed has to be affordable both in terms of time and money. It needs to have a testable hypothesis or an answerable research question. We need to keep it simple. Okay, we should not be too ambitious here. That's why it's important to ascertain or assess the feasibility before we go down and carry out the research. Second comes, it should be interesting. I, in finer criteria, I stands for interesting. It should arouse some interest to the investigator, to other researchers. It could be even interesting to the journal editors, to the possible funders, funding agencies who may be interested in funding this particular study, also to the policy makers. Policy makers include our government representatives, our officials. They are the ones, they are the stakeholders who at the higher level who are actually making the policies and also ensuring that it gets implemented. So it should be interesting to all, right? So it should be interesting. It should interest us, number one, and the other members of the research team, our colleagues, as well as possible funders. So we need to ask ourselves whether this research question is interesting. Number three is novel. Okay, as I told earlier, it need not be something earth shattering or path breaking, always a new discovery. But having said that, it should be novel. This is an essential prerequisite for publishability. When we are going down and publishing the study, a reviewer, who checks whether our manuscript is actually suitable for publication, will always see, oh, what is new in this particular study? But what does this new mean? It could either be the first ever study on this issue, very, very good. It could either be the first ever study in our setting. Okay, somebody else, I gave you the example of mortality among young COVID-19 patients. Why is it happening? Okay, somebody else in Delhi may have studied it, but this could still be the first ever study in my setting, that is in Karnataka, which is very unique, and it has a special characteristics by in terms of geography or population served. So we can either say that it's new because it's the first ever study in our setting. It need not be a first ever study on this issue alone. Okay, and how have we improved the methodology of previous studies? What improvisation have we done? What have we done to address the previous limitations and obtain more valid findings? So this is something we need to ask. It should be novel. It's an essential prerequisite to get the manuscript or get the research published in a good journal. Next comes ethical. I'm sure all of you know that ethics are very, very important. It's part and parcel of our life, and more so in a research, because we are dealing with human participants most often, right? So a good research question must be ethical. It must be approved by our institutional ethics committee. So every institution, every medical college or organization has an ethics committee. They sit periodically. It consists of various members from various specialties, experts, even legal experts as well. They sit and they review each and every protocol that has been submitted there. What are the ethical concerns? What has the study team done to address these ethical concerns? Are the rights of the participants being safeguarded? Is anonymity being maintained? Do they have a participant information sheet wherein they have clearly and simply in a simple manner, have they explained what is going on in the study in the participants own local language? And do they have a written informed consent form, as in we don't force people to be a part of our study? It's a voluntary decision. Plus, at any stage in the study, if a participant feels that I need to withdraw, he or she can do so. He or she has the absolute right and freedom to withdraw from the study at any stage without giving any valid explanation. Okay, so almost all research requires ethical review and consent process. It's a voluntary consent. It should not be enforced. Okay, so that is E, ethical. Then comes R, relevant. How my study findings, how will it influence the practice guidelines? How will it influence the health policy? How is it going to advance scientific knowledge? How is it going to guide future research? This is something that we need to ask ourselves. We need not necessarily tick all the boxes, but at least some of them. Okay, at least we expect that each and every research should be able to advance the scientific knowledge. There's no point in you doing a copy paste business here, replicating exactly what other person has done in another sitting. There should be something new, as I said. It should be able to advance the scientific knowledge. It should be able to guide future research. Okay, so we need to ask if our research question is actually relevant. Is it worthwhile to go out there and do this particular study using this research question? So this finer criteria is very, very important. Feasible, innovative, or interesting, novel, ethical, and relevant. Okay, so that's finer criteria. So how are these questions different? So you can see the first question here. Oh, it's like, do statins improve survival after acute MI? So it just tells me that are statins going to improve the survival after acute MI? So it may be a question, it may be a decent question, but it's not a good research question. Okay, so we need to be even more specific here. So the second line that you can see, this is a more specific research question. In patients with a first episode of acute MI, does administration of statins lead to higher survival rates compared to placebo? So it tells me that it's only the first episode of MI. Patients who have undergone, who are these patients? Patients who have already had one episode of ischemic heart disease or acute MI, an acute coronary event. Does administering statins in these patients, does it lead to a higher survival rate compared to what? Compared to a placebo. So this is more specific. This, we'll be able to apply the finer criteria better here. It's feasible, interesting, more interesting than the first one, novel. Okay, there's something new in it. It also looks, it should be ethical plus relevant as well. Okay, so that's why the second question that I mentioned is always complete in more aspects. So it should be as specific and as complete. You can look at this example here. Does watching TV cause obesity? This is just a question. Okay, if we watch TV, do we get obesity? But that's not a good research question. We need to be more specific. In school children, is increased TV viewing more than 4 hours per day? Okay, more than 4 hours per day. So they have defined it. What is that limit? What is that threshold? Is it associated with an increased incidence of obesity as measured using body mass index compared to moderate TV viewing, which is less than 1 hour per day? So they have defined what is increased TV viewing, what is moderate TV viewing, and is obesity, is an increased incidence of obesity seen among school children who indulge in increased TV viewing, that is more than 4 hours a day, when compared to those who indulge only in moderate TV viewing, that is less than 1 hour per day. And how do we do this measurement? How do we determine if the child is obese or not? By measuring the body mass index. So it tells us how we are also going to collect the data. So this research question is more complete in all aspects. So it should be complete. It should tell us, you know in compared to what, and what is that threshold, or what is that limit. All that information should be there. And how we are going to collect the data, we get to know by looking at a very well framed research question. Okay, then what is research objective? So we have seen what is hypothesis, what is question, what is objectives. Every research should have objectives. So these are planned endpoint of any activity, or especially in research. The primary objectives, say objectives could be more than one, it could be three or two, or whatever, whatever the research question is. To do justice to the research question, we need to have appropriate number of objectives. Okay, the primary objective of the study, there's something called primary objective or the first objective, that should be coupled with the research question or the hypothesis. So that should essentially be the research question. Okay, and objective here should be smart. Smart means Doesn't mean handsome or good looking or intelligent. Smart means specific, measurable, acceptable, relevant, and time bound. So again, it should be feasible. It's something similar to finer criteria that we saw for research question. It should be specific. It should be measurable. We should be able to achieve that particular objective and measure it. It should be acceptable. Okay, again, it should be relevant. It should be able to advance the scientific knowledge or help us in doing something new, or benefit the patient community or contribute to the body of evidence that we have. It should be time bound. I should be able to fulfill these objectives during the particular time or study timeline. Okay, and we use some action verbs to frame objectives, like to determine, to assess, to measure. I can't use a random word like to see or to check, to look. All these are very, very bad action verbs. So we need to use appropriate action verbs here, like the ones that I mentioned in this particular slide: to assess, to measure, to quantify, to suggest, to evaluate, to analyze, to determine, to estimate, to examine. All these are the action verbs that we can use to frame the objectives. So these are some examples of research objectives: to evaluate the use of blood and blood components issued from the blood bank of a tertiary care center. So we are here looking at the research objective, we get to know what exactly the study is about. It's about evaluating. They are going to evaluate the use of blood, the ultimate use of blood and blood components that are there in a blood bank of a tertiary care hospital. Second example, to determine the prevalence of hypophosphatemia in critically ill children. So we have critically ill children admitted in a hospital. What is the prevalence of hypophosphatemia among them? So it tells us what the research is all about. To compare the efficacy of electrocautery and long pulsed ND-YAG laser in the management of common wart. So we have two procedures. We have electrocautery plus a laser technique. How do these two compare? What is the efficacy of these two in comparison with each other in management of a condition called common warts? Then we have another example here: to find out the proportion of patients with recurrent dermatophyte infection, to determine the proportion of patients with recurrent dermatophyte infection. Okay, so these are some examples for research project objectives. So we need to know the difference between an aim and an objective. Aim is something that is broad. It's a broad main purpose of carrying out the research. So I'll give you an example here. I want to find out how many adults aged 18 years and above living in my rural area where I have my health center, how many of them are actually having hypertension. Okay, so to determine the prevalence of hypertension among adult population in a rural area of Karnataka, that becomes my aim. What are the objectives? The main objective or the primary objective should be coupled or should be a part of the main aim or the research question. Okay, so here the same aim, I can convert it into a research question. What is the prevalence of hypertension among adult population in a rural area of Karnataka? So that becomes a research question. Okay, so what are the objectives then? The first objective here is to determine the prevalence of hypertension among the adult population in a rural area of Karnataka. So that becomes the main objective or the primary objective. I can have more than one objective also. Okay, so here the situation demands that I am not only looking at the prevalence of hypertension, but also what are the factors that are associated with hypertension among my study participants. So that becomes my secondary objective, to assess the factors associated with hypertension among the study participants or among the adults who are residing in a rural area of Karnataka. So it could be age, it could be gender, it could be lack of physical activity, it could be obesity or overweight, it could be a consumption of junk food or high salt intake. All these are various factors that I need to evaluate whether they are actually associated with hypertension. So aim is always broad and one objectives are more specific, measurable, acceptable, relevant, and time tested. Okay, so this is something we need to remember here. So this is how it goes. This is the flow. We get an idea. Okay, then we have to formulate a research question. We do a literature search and review the literature. Then we actually come up with the conclusion that, oh my God, why am I doing this particular study? What is the rationale or need for doing this study? And then we frame the research objectives. Then we look into the other aspects, that is methodology, how we are actually doing the study. So for this, we need to know what are the various types of research. We can either classify them into descriptive or analytical, or there's also something called basic research, okay, or applied research. We also have something called conceptual research, empirical research. There are different classifications. To keep it simple, I'm going to tell you only one classification. We have quantitative and we have qualitative. Quantity means how much, something that we can measure. So to understand the magnitude of a condition or of an occurrence, and also to find out the associated factors, we do quantitative research. Okay, and then we have qualitative. Qualitative is something that we cannot count or we can not measure, right? To understand the nature or quality of a phenomenon, to answer questions like how much, we go for quantitative. How much, how many adults are having hypertension, how many children are diagnosed with COVID-19. Okay, so that's how much, quantitative. Then we have qualitative, to answer some other questions, to understand a particular phenomenon in depth, to answer questions like who, what, how, when, why. We make use of qualitative research methods. Okay, so quantitative studies can be further subclassified into observational and interventional. So observational we can further divide into cross-sectional, case control, cohort, etc. And interventional could be either randomized control trial and non-randomized trial. We'll look at this later. Okay, then we have qualitative. Qualitative studies can be either done through observation. I can observe a group of people. Okay, to answer some sensitive questions like why is it that students are consuming drugs? It's a very sensitive question. Why is it that we have many students turning into drug addicts? We cannot do a quantitative research there. We cannot use a questionnaire and measure, right? Because it's a very hidden, underreported problem. There's a lot of stigma associated with drug usage or drug addiction, right? So that is when we need to go for a qualitative research. How can we do it? There are different methods. Either we can observe a group of students and see, look at their daily life and see why they are becoming drug addicts and what can be done to solve this particular problem. Then we can also conduct interviews, what we call as in-depth interviews. That is one-on-one, you interview the participant, you have an interview guide, take consent for audio recording. If they do not give consent for that, we may have to take down field notes. Everything has to be ideally audio recorded if the participant gives consent. So we also have an in-depth interview guide. We do not have a questionnaire, but a guide that we have formulated in advance just to see if the flow is proper, flow of that particular interview is proper, and we probe that issue in detail. Okay, so here as a moderator I should not dominate the discussion, dominate the interview. I need to give enough space for the participant to ventilate or to express their thoughts, concerns, ideas, as well as suggestions. So that's in-depth interview. And at the end of the interview I need to read out the main points of the interview to the participant and seek his or her approval. That's very much important. Then we have focus group discussion. If I get a group of people, maybe if the topic is less sensitive, not as sensitive as drug addiction. Drug addiction, I can't go for a focus group discussion. It will be a failure. Nobody will open up because they do not want their friend to know about it, right? So if it's not as sensitive, if I want to find out, you know, why is it that there are not enough hospitals in the rural area, I can go to a village. I can actually approach villagers or responsible people, their panchayat members and few other people, members of the community, and I can carry out a focus group discussion and probe that particular issue in detail. Focus group discussion is a group of people. It involves discussion in a group, okay, a group who have something in common, plus a group who is willing to participate and give their opinion, give their ideas, give their suggestions. So we involve the entire group, we ask them questions, and we need to moderate it in such a way that we do not dominate. We need to ensure that the participants freely discuss. So that is qualitative. To understand in depth the nature or quality of a phenomenon, we go for a qualitative research. To understand how much or the magnitude of an occurrence and association, we go for quantitative. Many of the times, we may go for a mixed method study. That is, it involves both quantitative as well as qualitative components. So the qualitative component may give us further insights about that particular topic or that issue. So, and it adds on or builds on the quantitative findings. So that's called mixed method study design. So mainly we have either quantitative or qualitative research. Quantitative is something that can be measured. Qualitative is something that is difficult to measure or that we cannot measure. So now I'm going to tell you about study designs. So when we build a house, what is necessary for us? Number one, we need land. We need to have enough money to buy the land. Otherwise, the plan is dropped. Okay. Assuming we have money, we have land, we go to an architect and we ask him to design the house. We sit with him and design the house. If this design is pakka, if it is solid, then the house is also going to be well built, right? So similarly, we have something called study designs. Okay, we need to choose the appropriate study design. So these are the various epidemiological studies. I'm sure undergraduates who have passed through third year will be knowing this. So these, we can mainly classify them into observational and experimental or interventional studies. Observational can be further divided into descriptive and analytical. Descriptive, if we do it in an individual, we call it as case report. So in my practice, I have encountered a patient with unusual clinical features or findings, or maybe some new drug that I didn't expect it to work in this particular condition has worked out. And I want to tell the scientific community about this. That is when I go for a case report. Individual case. There's only one case that I've reported. Case series means series of cases with the similar findings. Something which is usual, there's no fun in doing a case report. Something that has to be unusual or unexpected, we can do a case report or a case series depending on the number. If it's only one individual patient, we go for a case report. If there are more than one patient, then we go for case series. Then we have descriptive epidemiological studies. Here we describe the disease in terms of time, place, and person. Okay, some diseases occurred. Let's say malaria. Malaria is quite common here in my area, in Mangalore. We have, all these vector-borne diseases like malaria, dengue, and now this is the season. So I look at malaria and I look at the distribution of malaria in terms of time, which season it's more common, place, which place it's more common. Is it more common in the coastal area, or is it more common in an area where there's not enough sanitation? So that's place distribution. Then person distribution, who are likely to get it, men or women, younger people or older people. Okay, so we study the disease in terms of time, place, and person. So that is descriptive studies. Then we have analytical studies. We have something called cross-sectional study. Here we carry out the study at one particular point of time. So I may go to a school, a class, and I may just find out how many children are having glasses or spectacles, right? So I do at one particular point of time and I complete my study. So that becomes cross-sectional, which is done at one particular point of time. And based on that, I can get the prevalence of one particular event or prevalence of myopia or people who are having refractive errors. But if I go again next day, maybe some child may have been absent on the first day, and that child may be having glasses, right? So the result may change from time to time. So that's the drawback with cross-sectional study. The results always change. We call it as prevalence study because we get to know the prevalence of a disease. And for chronic disease, cross-sectional studies are good enough. So my thesis or my dissertation that I undertook as a part of my MD community medicine years ago, 10 years ago, was about prevalence of obesity among school children. So I went to various schools in my area and I measured. I had a sample of schools. I didn't go everywhere. I had a sampling procedure, strategy. I had a sample size calculation. So I went to a particular class and I did some measurements like height, weight, body mass index, and found out how many are actually obese or overweight. So, but that may vary. If I go back again after 6 months, some other children may get added to that obesity list, or some of them may have reduced their weight. We don't know. So that's the drawback with cross-sectional studies. Then we have case control study, what we call as retrospective study. So we have a group of people, let's say a women having breast cancer, group of women. Okay, I want to find out what exactly may have contributed to breast cancer. So I select these women as cases, and then I select appropriate controls who do not have that particular condition in question, which is breast cancer. Okay, so they are closer to the same age. They should be or belong to the same gender, of course. We can't do it among men. So the controls have to be women here in this case, and their age group also has to be similar. They have to be similar in terms of certain appropriate characteristics. So we call it as matching. We match them up, just like in an arranged marriage, right? So we match up guys with girls or bride with bridegroom. So we see if there's something in common or the horoscope actually matches. Their interests, do they match? So same thing here, we match them up, and then we go back in time. We evaluate the past history or the past records of both the cases and controls with equal intensity. Okay, it's not that I ask more questions to the cases and I ignore the controls completely. Okay, so otherwise if I do that, that becomes a bias. Okay, and then I go back and I try to find out what exactly may have contributed to this particular disease. So that's called case control study. It's a retrospective or backward looking study. So this is a good type of study, better than cross section, of course, but there could be an element of bias, especially recall bias, because we are asking people, that is cases and controls, about their past, and many a times they may not be able to recall it. So that recall bias is there. Sometimes there could be an interviewer's bias, that is the, you know, investigator asks more questions to the cases when compared to the controls. So all this may lead to errors or flaws in the study. Then we have another type of study called cohort study, which is also called as longitudinal study, follow-up study, prospective study. All these are various names of cohort study. What exactly do we do here? Cohort means group of people who have something in common, some common characteristics. Okay, if we are all born on the same day, we call them as birth cohorts. If we are all studying in the same year, maybe third year MBBS, they become cohorts. So somebody, group of smokers, they become cohorts. Group of alcoholics, they become cohorts. Group of radiologists, they become cohorts. So we need to have a common group having some common characteristics. They are healthy people, mind you. They do not have the disease in question, and we follow them up. We follow up the cohorts, as well as we need to have a suitable comparison group, okay, who do not have that particular exposure or that common characteristic. We follow up both the groups with equal intensity, and in one particular point of time, people may develop disease. So that we consider as end point, and then we do the analysis. We try to find out, okay, is the disease more common in the exposure group or people who are, you know, having that common characteristics, or is it more common in the comparison group? So many of these major studies were cohort studies. So we know that there are many risk factors for coronary artery disease, like diet, physical inactivity, genetic, or it could be high dyslipidemia. So thanks to cohort studies that have been carried out on this particular topic, we know that these are the major risk factors for coronary artery disease. This is just one example that I'm giving you. So we call them as longitudinal study, prospective study, forward-looking study. It's we get to know the incidence or the new cases of a disease. So it's much better than a case control study in terms of the evidence that is generated. But there are issues. It's difficult to conduct. There's something called attrition. So these cohort studies usually take place for a lengthy period. Many a times what may happen, the participant may change his behavior. So if you have a group of smokers, many of them may get conscious when we evaluate them from time to time, when we follow them up, they may give up smoking, right? So that could be there. Or many of them may lose interest in the study. Many of them may even die in some major cohort studies that have taken place for a very lengthy period of time. So we call it as attrition or loss to follow up. That is there. Plus, it's very, very expensive. It could be expensive. It could be time consuming. So these are the disadvantages of a cohort study. But having said that, scientifically, in terms of the evidence that has been generated, it is much stronger than case control and definitely stronger than cross section. So that's about observational studies. Then we have experimental studies or interventional studies. So we could divide them into non-randomized trial and randomized trial. So suppose I have a new drug that I have found out. To ensure that students are always awake in classes, whether it's online class or offline class, it's like a stimulant, and I want to test whether it will be actually effective, I go for an experimental study. So, or a clinical trial or a randomized control trial. So there's a difference between randomized and non-randomized. In randomized control trial, the heart of this study is something called randomization, wherein we ensure that the like is compared with both groups. That is, we have a study group or the experimental group and the control group. Both have an equal chance. Every participant has an equal chance of falling into either the experimental group or the study group or the control arm. So that's called randomization. We could either do it by using a table of random numbers, or it's like it could even be done using a dice. When we roll a dice, we do not have control, right? The investigator or the persons who are conducting the study do not have control over this. Okay, or it could be heads or tails. When we toss the coin before a match, football match or cricket match, we toss a coin, right? So nobody has control over that. So that is another example for randomization. So we could use computer. Of course, nowadays we have software which help us to do this randomization. So to ensure that the like is comparable, okay, with the like. That means every participant has an equal chance of either falling into the experimental arm or to the control arm. So that's called randomization, which is there in randomized control trial. If the same randomization is not there, or if I only decide, being the investigator, that this particular person, this participant A comes into the experimental group, this participant B comes into the control group, where the investigator gets to decide, there is some bias there. So that becomes non-randomized trial. Okay, so ideally when we test a new drug, new therapy, new procedure, new surgical procedure, it could be even an exercise, something that is new, or a new counseling module that I've developed, we need to go for an experimental study. Mainly a randomized control trial is ideal. Okay, so wherein what we do here is we select the study population. Okay, and then we divide, and from that we select something called experimental population, or the participants who are going to participate. Really, we take consent from them, we do some eligibility testing and find out if they are really eligible to be a part of our study. Okay, and then we apply a procedure called randomization. It could be done either through a table of random numbers or through a computer. Different types of randomization there are there, through which we randomly allocate the participants either to an experimental or interventional arm or to the control arm. And then we have a procedure called manipulation. That is, I give my treatment that I want to test. It could be a drug, it could be a procedure, it could be an exercise, it could be a counseling module, anything that I want to test, I give it to the experimental or interventional arm. To the control arm, I need to give something else. If it's a drug, I give a placebo, or if it's something like a procedure, I give usual care, or the standard of care, or treatment as usual, that is usually practiced under normal circumstances. And then we evaluate which group has a better result. So that's an experimental study or interventional study. So these are the various study designs, and you can look at the strength of evidence here. Case series and case reports are much lower. Above that, we have cross-sectional studies. One step above that is case control. Then we have cohort studies. Then randomized control trials on top. Okay. So now we have planned the research. Have we planned the research? Yes. We know what are the objectives. We know who are the study population. We have chosen the research design. Next is we should put everything in paper. We need to have a research protocol. What is a research protocol? It is a document that describes the introduction or introduces the topic, the background, the rationale, the objectives, the design, methodology, what statistical tests have to be applied or statistical considerations, and the overall organization of a research project. So it's a document that is complete in all aspects, that tells us how we are going to do the study. Okay. So these are the parts of a research protocol. We start with introduction or background, and then we have a review of literature section, objectives, materials and methods, and references. So let's see one by one. First comes introduction. Many of them also call it as background. What do we do here? We set the scene initially. What is the general problem? So here Took the example of COVID-19 deaths among younger population. So I have to set the scene. What is COVID-19? Why are younger population actually, why could younger population be vulnerable to this particular disease? So what is the general problem as such? How many cases have been reported? All that I can put initially, introduce the topic. Then the specific question has to be addressed. What is that specific question? Why is it that younger patients are dying because of COVID-19? What has been done before? What studies have been carried out before? It could be elsewhere, it could be in other parts of the country, or it could be even international studies. What were the problems with the previous research? What did they see and what they did not see? What is still not known? What are the gaps? What is new with my study? How am I adding on to what has already been covered? And then we usually conclude with aim or objectives of the study. So this is an introduction section. So basically we introduce the reader to this particular problem, and then we start off broadly. We come up with some definitions and all that. We set the scene, and then we come up with the specific question that has to be addressed. And then we quote some studies that have been done earlier. What were the issues with those studies? What was known and what is still unknown? What are the gaps that are existing in the knowledge with respect to this particular topic, and how our study is going to address these gaps? What is new with our study? What is the rationale or need for conducting this particular study? And then we conclude with the aim or objectives. Then we have another important section called materials and methods. What is the study design? So this should include the following parts. Study design. Is it cross-sectional? Is it case control? Is it cohort? Is it a randomized control trial? Is it a non-randomized trial? Is it a mixed method study which has both quantitative and qualitative components? So we need to describe what is the study design. Then what is the study setting or the place where we are carrying out the study? So suppose I'm doing a study in my medical college hospital. So I should say that the study will be carried out in a teaching hospital attached to a private medical college in Mangalore, Dakshin Kannada district, Karnataka, India. So the number of beds in this hospital is so many. At least that information should be there. So study setting has two parts. There's something called general setting. There's a specific setting. General setting includes the district as well as the city or the village related details. Specific is the more specific area or the place, geographical location or the place. It could be a medical college hospital, it could be an area or rural community or an urban community attached to a medical college. Specific setting actually explains, the specific area where we are carrying out the study and what is going on there with respect to the research topic. Suppose I'm doing a study on screening of diabetes, screening for diabetes among adults in a rural area, okay, in Karnataka. So in my general setting, I need to explain about Karnataka, how many districts are there, what is the overall prevalence of diabetes in Karnataka as well as in the district. So that becomes general setting. Then comes the specific setting, okay. What is the area where I'm conducting the study? What is the name of the area? Is it a rural area or is it an urban area? How many houses are there? How many adults? What is the current adult population? Okay. Has there been any previous study carried out to find out the screening of diabetes? What is being done to screen adults for diabetes in that particular setting? All that has to be explained in the study setting. Then comes study population. Who are our study participants? Do I have an inclusion criteria? Whom I'm going to include? Who will be excluded? People having certain conditions, are they going to be excluded? So that has to be decided. Then comes sample size and sampling method. It's not possible for me to survey the entire area or survey the entire hospital and include each and every hospital, each and every patient having that particular outcome, right? So I need to have a sampling procedure and a sample size calculation. For this, we need to consult the statistician. What is the study period or the timeline for this particular study? So we need to appropriately select the study period. We should not be too ambitious. It should be done in a feasible manner. What are the variables here? I told you again earlier, there's something called outcome variable or dependent variable. And then we have predictor or independent variables. What are the various independent variables here in this study? What are the various data sources? How I'm going to collect the data? What are the sources for this data? Is it a record based study? Suppose I'm doing a hospital-based study which looks into the prevalence of diabetes among elderly patients who are attending the OPD. Okay, how many are actually diabetic? So this I may be able to get this information based on the medical records. So what exactly is the source of the data? Is it a primary data? Primary data means something that the investigator actually goes out there, interviews and finds out, collects this particular information. Or is it secondary data that's already there in the registers, in the records? So data sources have to be mentioned. So we should think about all these things. Data collection, how are we going to do the data collection? What procedures are we going to adopt? So example, in my thesis or my dissertation on obesity among school children, I had to explain how I'm collecting the data. Okay, once I go to a school, I take permission, obtain permission from the school authorities, from the headmaster and the teacher, as well as the parent of the child. Then I go there, go to a school, go to a classroom there. I have a questionnaire with me. I administer the questionnaire. I interview all the participants using this particular questionnaire. And then I do the measurements like height, weight, what technique I'll be using, what kind of machines I'm going to use, what is the error, how I'm going to calculate the body mass index, the formula. Everything had to be described in that subsection called data collection. And how to analyze the data. What statistical tools or software I will be using to analyze the data, that has to be mentioned. And the ethical considerations have to be mentioned. So again, I've already taught you about what is a dependent or outcome variable and independent or predictor variable. So here I'm going to give you an example here. This is a study of optic nerve damage among patients visiting a tertiary care hospital. The main variable or the outcome or dependent variable here is optic nerve damage. And what are the independent or predictor variables here? It could be age, it could be gender, it could be comorbid condition, or it could be, the extent of damage. So all these are the other variables which may influence or be associated with the outcome variables. So it's important to identify these variables in advance. So we need to have the entire plan ready. Let me give you another example now. Clinical profile of patient with acute febrile illness admitted in a hospital. The outcome or dependent variable is acute febrile illness. Agreed. Then what are the independent or predictor variables? It could be the various patient related characteristics, the various demographic variables, what we call age, gender, residence, okay, time of admission could be one. So all these are the various independent or predictor variables. Let me give you another example. Depression among postnatal women who are attending a tertiary care hospital. The dependent or outcome variable here is depression among postnatal women. What are the independent or predictor variables? Again, it could be various social demographic characteristics like age, education status, type of family, family support, all those could be there, especially in case of depression. Plus, we could also have some obstetric related variables, whether that woman is a primary or a multi, or or overall her health seeking behavior, how were her previous pregnancies, whether any stressful events in the pregnancy, whether any complications, all those can be collected. So all those become the independent or predictor variables which may be associated with the outcome variable. So it's very important to identify all these variables well in advance. And then I'm going to tell you more about study period. This is called a Gantt chart. Gantt chart is a graphical representation of the various activities of a study with respect to time. So this was one Gantt chart or study timeline that we prepared for an undergraduate research project. The time period that we had was only around 1 to 1.5 months. So if you can see here, there are just 5 weeks, and we have activities and time for each of the activities that we have graphically represented. Review of literature. It's an ongoing activity, so it may require 4 weeks. Preparation of protocol and ethics approval, investigator training, first 2 weeks. Data collection, maybe 1 week. So this was a very simple topic. So we have kept very less period for data collection. Data entry and analysis, again, 1 week. Report writing, 1 week. So we need to sit with our guide, with our other colleagues, and decide what is the appropriate timeline for the various activities under the study. And we need to stick to this timeline. So it's not something that's only on paper in the protocol. We need to make our maximum efforts to stick to this particular timeline over here. Okay. Fine. Yeah, and then we have ethical considerations. So what is ethical here? Ethical is to be principled, is to be rightful. It should be fair and decent and just to the participants. Being researchers, it's our duty to safeguard the dignity, rights, safety, as well as well-being of our study participants, because we are dealing with humans here. So the ethical considerations that we need to define or describe in a protocol include permission from the authorities. Okay, if I'm doing it in my hospital, I should take official permission from the dean or director of the institute, as well as the medical superintendent. So permission from the authorities have to be taken. If my study area is a rural community, I need to take consent as well as permission from the district health administrators. It's my duty. So permission from authorities plus institutional ethics committee approval. I told you about this, that before carrying out any study, we need to take approval from this committee. We also need to have a participant information sheet wherein the nature of the study, the experiments that we have devised, the procedures that are involved, what exactly is the role of the participant, everything has to be put in paper in the participant's own language, and we need to explain it to the participant in his own language and give him a copy of that. So that's called participant information sheet. Plus written informed consent form has to be prepared, and it has to be clearly mentioned that at any stage the participant has an absolute right to withdraw from the study without giving any valid reason or justification, and we are not supposed to force people to participate in the study. So these are the ethical considerations that one must address in a research protocol. Then of course we have budget. If we are going for funding, we need to have a budget statement. Okay, so we need to budget for the personnel, the people whom we are going to hire in our research project. Okay, it could be a research assistant, research fellow, or field worker, or lab technician, nurse, or anybody whom we want to hire, appoint specifically for this particular project. So we need to budget for that because we need to pay salaries to them, right? So if you see in any project, maximum expenditure will be for the personnel or for the people who are recruited as research staff. Then we have something called recurring expenses. It could be printing of questionnaires, stationary item. Recurring means it is recurring. It's a recurring expenditure. It's not one time. Or it could be travel to a particular study area. I can travel many times to collect data, right? So that becomes recurring expenses. Then we have non-recurring expenses, which is a one-time expenditure. If I purchase an equipment for a project, it could be a computer, it could be a computer tablet, it could be a printer that I've purchased. So that's non-recurring expenditure. Then we have travel expenditures. We can also put travel expenditures. Suppose we are traveling to the study site and it's far away from our workplace, we can budget it. We also have overhead expenditure, which is around 5% of the other heads. 5% of the other four heads that I mentioned is called overhead expenditure. That also has to be defined in a budget. So this is how a budget looks like. An example, you can see these are the various headings. We have personnel, then we have something called contingencies, which includes recurring expenditure and non-recurring expenditure. And then we have overhead, which is 5% of the total budget. And then we have a total budget component here. So it's also important to budget it if we are going for funding. Okay, so the funding agency will look into the budget statement. It's also important to justify. You can see that I've not just put the amount here and the unit cost or the quantity. I have to justify why this amount has been put. So we need to sit, we need to brainstorm, consult others, and carefully draft this particular document if we are going for funding. Okay, then comes references. What are these references? References include literature that has been referred before, during, and after the study. So it could be either journal articles or books or websites, documents, reports, or conference proceedings. So we need to put that all in our references, which is towards the end of the protocol or end of a research paper. And there are different styles that are available. I'm not going more into details here, but please remember that Vancouver is what we commonly follow. We also have some other styles like American Psychological Association or the APA style, the National Library of Medicine reference style, the American Medical Association style, Modern Language Association style, as well as Harvard style. Okay, so there's a difference between reference and bibliography. Reference means they are a part of the main text of that article. Okay, and something that we have referred, and it's a part, it has been cited in the article. Bibliography is something that we have referred as a part of this study, but we have not used it anywhere in the main text of the article. So bibliography is actually broader than the references. That's the basic difference between the two. So it's important to cite the references. We need to give due credit to the person who has given this particular statement, or from whose article we have adopted this particular statement. So having said that, it's incorrect to do copy paste also. We need to paraphrase the words. Okay, we can't say that if somebody has said, oh, COVID-19 is a very common illness, I can't use the same sentence as it is. I need to make some changes. I need to paraphrase it. Okay, if I use it same clear cut copy paste, if I send it to a journal, that amounts to plagiarism. They'll say that you have plagiarized this particular statement or sentence from this particular article. No, I need to paraphrase in such a way that the meaning is conveyed, but the words are my own. That's why I need to read those articles carefully and interpret in my own way, so that the meaning is not distorted. Meaning should be the same. So that is the importance of references. So we have seen the various aspects of protocol writing. Next is the implementation part, which is very, very difficult again, because whatever is there on paper, we need to do justice to it, right? So here, in the first step, we have something called pilot study, which may be undertaken. So here we take a small sample of the total sample size. If the total sample size is 300, we have sat with our statistician, and the statistician has given us a formula and told us that the sample size is 300. We may do a pilot study on maybe around 10% of that particular population. Okay, or 10 or 5%. This is just to check if the questionnaire that we have prepared is actually good, it's easy to understand, or the study is feasible. So that's called pilot study. Are there any challenges that I need to address before I go for the main study? So we do a pilot study. Once we have ironed out all the flaws, we have corrected the mistakes that are there, we do the main data collection, and then comes data management, which includes data entry and data analysis. Then comes interpretation, that is making sense of the results, and reporting the study results. Report writing at the end of the day is very important. So how do we collect data? So we should always prepare the questionnaire in such a way that we have that it addresses the research question. So we should know what is our research question, what is the primary objective of our study, who are our participants, what type of data is required before we sit down and prepare a questionnaire. And then questionnaire can be called in various names. It can also be called as a proforma. Proforma includes not just questions, but there are some statements involved there also. Then we have case record form. So if we are not interviewing the participants directly, if we are just looking at their lab values or maybe just records, we call it as a case record form. For a qualitative research, we don't have questionnaire. We have something called guides to facilitate our discussion or interview. Okay, so we should look at our research question, our primary objective, and carefully formulate the questionnaire. So it's a data collection tool. What are the major type of questions that are there? So we could have open-ended questions, we could have close-ended questions. Open-ended, how are you feeling today, for example? That's an open-ended question. I might be feeling good, bad, very bad, etc. That's up to the participant to answer. So we see these kind of questions mainly in qualitative studies. Okay, we do not see these questions or use these questions quite often in the quantitative studies. Then comes, what exactly do we use in quantitative studies? We have more of close-ended questions, either dichotomous questions. Okay, are you feeling healthy, yes or no? So that's a dichotomous question, two responses to that. Or it could be a multiple choice question. We all know what MCQs are, right? Or it could be a rank order question. Okay, uh, how did you like my webinar? And there could be 4 or 5 responses to that. Okay, excellent, good, moderate, poor, very poor. So that's called rank order type of questions. We also have something called Likert scale, which is nothing but ranking. Okay, so that gives us a better outlook or better understanding when compared to a dichotomous or multiple choice question. Okay, so there could be open-ended questions or close-ended questions, and we need to keep in mind these steps before designing a questionnaire. So these are the steps involved or the stages of questionnaire design. So we should know, as I told you earlier, we should know what is our research question. Define your research question. Okay, decide who is your study population, decide how you are going to administer the questionnaire. Are you going to directly interview them, or are you going to give them to fill it up? Formulate your questions, then formulate the responses, pre-pilot the questions. It's important to pilot it out, give it to experts, and even go interview a small sample of the population and find out if there are any mistakes, if the questions are really easy to understand or comprehend, and then finally go ahead and freeze and finalize the questionnaire. So it's again a stage, it's a process, it cannot be done on one day, it's not one day's work. Okay, yeah, so there are some principles of questionnaire wording. I'm not going more into the details here. We need to use simple language, avoid jargon. I can't use the word, okay, are you getting palpitations? A layman will not be able to understand. So avoid technical terms, avoid jargon. I can use a simple word like, are you aware of your own heartbeat? Right? So we always tell this even when we are doing clinical history taking, right? Keep it short and specific, avoid ambiguities, avoid double barreled question. Are you satisfied with your career and happy with your marriage? That's a double barrel question, right? So there are two questions there. The participant will be confused what to answer. Avoid double negatives. There aren't no chairs here. So that's a double negative. So it should not be very ambiguous or confusing. Avoid very loaded words. Avoid leading questions. Okay, are you practicing or do you have any high risk behavior? That's a leading question. We all know that we have been told in clinical medicine that do not ask any leading question. Do not overtax the respondent's memory. Okay, do not ask him something that happened in way in the past. Okay, 1 month ago, what did you have for breakfast? How many dosas did you have for breakfast? That will overtax the respondent's memory. So do not include such questions. Keep it as simple as possible. Avoid hypothetical questions. Okay, suppose you were the Prime Minister of India, what you have done. That's a hypothetical question. So avoid hypothetical questions in a questionnaire. Keep it as simple as possible. Use simple language, avoid jargon, avoid technical terms. Okay, so that's why it is always important to review our questionnaire as well. Okay, so we need to look into the reliability and validity. Reliability means reproducibility in other settings. So we all believe that Sachin Tendulkar was a very consistent player. Virat Kohli now is a very consistent player because he can score runs everywhere, all over the world, whether it's India, England, Australia, South Africa, West Indies. So similarly, the questionnaire that we use has to be reliable. Reproducibility in other settings should be possible. It should be valid. That is, it should measure what it is supposed to measure. So it should be valid and reliable. So validity has different forms here. There's something called face validity. So the relevance of measurement here appears obvious to the investigator. For example, BCG scar, it's obvious, right? I can see it and I can find out. It's quite obvious to me. So that's called face validity. What appears in the face value? Then we have content validity. All component elements of the variable are measured. For example, in OBGY and pediatrics, we have something called Apgar score. And you know what is the full form of Apgar score, right? It includes appearance, pulse, grimace, even the respiratory effort, reflexes, everything is given consideration. So all component elements which assess the maturity of the neonate are taken into consideration. So that is content validity. Then we have consensual validity. When number of experts agree with that particular question, that becomes consensual validity. Everybody give consensus. Everybody say that, okay, it's a good question to ask. Then there's criterion validity. When we compare it with gold standard, is it comparable to the gold standard? Then we have convergent validity. Compare with other measures of the same variable. For example, in community medicine, we have socio-economic status scale. and we use either Kuppuswamy or modified BG Prasad. Many of them actually ask me, many students ask, sir, why do we use Kuppuswamy only? Why do we use modified BG Prasad only? That is because it has a good convergent validity. When compared to the other measures, when compared to other socioeconomic status scale, this scale is better off. It compares better. So the convergent validity is taken care of. So these are the various aspects of validity that we need to ascertain in a questionnaire. Okay, so this is a very good way of depicting reliability and validity. You can see here, this is neither reliable or valid. It is scattered all over. This is reliable because you have results around the same area. Is it valid? No, it's not valid. If it was somewhere close to the smaller square circle, I would have said that it is valid. This is valid because it's all closer to the main circle area. It is actually measuring what it is supposed to measure. This is both reliable and valid because it's reproducible as well as it is measuring what it is supposed to measure. So ideally, a questionnaire or a proforma or a case record form has to be reliable and valid. That's it. It should be consistent or reproducible, plus it should measure what it is supposed to measure. Okay. So now, how do we manage this entire questionnaire or data collection proforma? We need to have a good system to manage it. We need to get enough copies printed. Keep the copy safe in a lock and key in a cupboard. Do not keep it here and there on the table. If it is lost, then we are answerable. After each sheet has been completed, keep the data safe. If possible, use a good thick hard artback office file and keep it safely. Data entry has to be done soon after collection. We can't wait long because if we lose it, then it's gone. So data entry has to be done as soon as possible after the data collection, and keep backing up the data frequently. Have backups of the data entry that is done also. Okay. So backup is important. Store the hard copies of the forms. If we are using hard copies, as per the ethical principles, we need to keep it for at least 5 years after completion of the study. Only then we can discard it. Okay. We have to have a good secure filing system. We can't, you know, store it like this, heaps of bundles, right? It's not like a newspaper. We should have a system. This is how my cupboard looks like. I've organized it very well. It should be good and secure. Okay, make sure that there's enough space and it's more secure. Okay, store the hard copies of the forms. Make sure that there's a good system. Okay, we need to remember the following points in data collection. Only collect the data that we'll use. Link it with the objective. Many of them, they are very ambitious. They include all sorts of variables and finally it's a mess. It should not be a mess. Be systematic. Our data is precious, so back it up. Have a backup. Less is more. Don't be under the impression that I'll have more and more variables, a very lengthy questionnaire, and my study will be good. No, less is actually more. We need to be as specific as possible here also while drafting the questionnaire. Now we have collected the data, we have done the study, we need to enter the data and analyze the data. So here I would like to tell you a recent update. There are some data capture tools, like for example, I use something called EpiCollect, which has a mobile app as well as a web portal. The web portal is used to design the questionnaire and the mobile app is to collect the data or capture the data. And once I capture the data using my smartphone, using this app called EpiCollect, everything gets synced into the web portal or into the main system. So both data collection and data entry happen simultaneously. So this minimizes most of the errors that we see in the printouts or having hard copies. So this is one newer way of data collection or data capture, what we call as quality assured data capture, where we can minimize the errors that are there in using hard copies. Otherwise, we can always go for the conventional hard copy data collection, but we need to minimize the mistakes. We need to take care that the errors are minimized, and then we can use appropriate software for data entry. Either we can use Microsoft Excel, which is very simple, or there are some specialized softwares like Epidata, which we can use for entry. Plus, for analysis, we have some tools and softwares. SPSS or statistical package for the social sciences is one that is commonly used. We also have Epidata analysis software here. We also have Stata software. So use an appropriate tool or software. It's always nice to get trained in data entry, data capture, and data analysis. But having said that, always consult a statistician. Consult a statistician, go to the statistician with the appropriate information, okay, take their guidance, take their help. Okay, so that's about data entry and data analysis. And of course, there are different types of statistical tests that can be done. So we have two types of variables, like continuous variables, something that we can measure like height and weight. All these are continuous variables. Categorical variables are something that we cannot measure like that. It could be a yes no dichotomous response. So all continuous variables we describe them either in terms of means or medians or standard deviations and interquartile range. Categorical variables are described in terms of percentages and proportions. So we call these type of statistics as descriptive statistics, wherein we describe what kind of variables are there. Then we have inferential statistics. For continuous variables, if there are two groups that we are comparing, we make use of a test called t-test. If there are more than two groups, we make use of a test called ANOVA, or one-way analysis of variance. Then, if there are categorical variables, we either go for chi-square test or another test called Fisher exact test. So these are some basic inferential statistics tests to make more sense of the data, or to interpret the data, and also to find out what are the factors associated with the main variable. Okay, I'm not going more into the details. Again, this is another one-day session, so I don't want to bug you more on this. Okay, but please remember that there are appropriate statistical tests. We have descriptive statistics plus inferential statistics, which are higher level statistical tests, which have to be applied in the research to find out the results or to analyze the data. Okay, so these are the basic steps of medical research that we have discussed over the last 1.5 hours. We have identified and defined the problem. We have analyzed the needs, reviewed the literature, determined that this problem is important and significant. We have formulated the hypothesis, categorized the variables. Then we have planned the research. We have formulated what are the objectives. Okay, we know who are our study population. We have chosen the research design. We have described the entire method of data collection. We have also described the plan for data management, and then we implement it, we put the plan into practice, we do a pilot study or a feasibility study, then we collect the data, we do the main data collection, then comes data entry and analysis. Once we analyze the data, we interpret the findings, and finally it's important to prepare a report. It's important to disseminate the results. How can we disseminate the results? We need to tell the scientific community. If we just keep everything inside our cupboard, there's no fun in doing research, right? What is the problem with research here is that very few research projects get actually published. Okay, so this is a problem that we are encountering as medical researchers. So either we can go for conferences. Okay, there are various associations, various specialties. Your group itself, I believe, has conducted a very big conference, right? So various associations, various specialties, where there's a platform given for researchers or students to go and disseminate their findings. So either we have oral presentations or poster presentations, or it could be as a part of a symposium where a group of experts, they come, they speak one by one on a given topic, or invited talks. So for an oral or poster presentation, we need to send an abstract to that particular conference organizer, maybe 250 to 300 words. And then based on the abstract, based on the merit of the abstract, they decide whether to accept it or reject it. And there are two types of presentation, oral and poster. One thing we need to remember here is that we cannot beat around the bush. We have to be as specific when we give a talk. We need to follow the proper etiquettes, plus the PowerPoint presentation guidelines. Do not overcrowd the slides. Okay, and keep it concise, keep it specific. We are not given half an hour or 45 minutes or 1 hour. It's not like a big lecture or a webinar like this one. It has to be as concise and specific, maybe 7 minutes or 10 minutes, sometimes even 5 minutes. So we should have the ability to summarize or convey the message that we intend to give to the audience in an effective manner. So that skill we learn from experience. Earlier, even I used to find it very difficult, but over a period of time now, I stick to the time in my conference presentations. So that is one way of disseminating the findings. Then we have publications. So we need to ensure that the journals that we are sending our manuscript to is a peer reviewed one. We have many predatory journals who are cheating. You just give a money, get published. That's now how it should be. There should be a review process. They should send the manuscript to reviewers, and the reviewers need to give us comments. They should read the article and tell us what is good, what is bad, how it can be improved. All these journals have to have an ISSN number, or International Standard Serial Number, and it is better if it is indexed in one of these indexing agencies like PubMed, Scopus, Web of Science, or Embase. So these are considered as the gold standards. It's better, even better, if it has an impact factor. Impact factor is a measure which is calculated based on the number of citations of the articles published in that particular journal over the last 2 years. So there's something called Thomson Reuters. It's an organization which gives impact factor. So that is considered to be valid. Okay, so we can go for a good impact factor journal. If we are going, if we are very fond of quality, then we should look into the indexing as well as the impact factor. So now, of course, for all medical faculty, we should go for an index journal. Either it should be in PubMed or Scopus or Web of Science or Embase. So it's mandatory for us to go for that. Okay, and all these scientific manuscripts should be in a format called IMRAD: introduction, methods, results, and discussion. So we know what to write in the introduction, we know what to write in the methods. I've told you earlier what to write in the results. We should present just the facts, nothing but the facts, only relevant results, what is relevant to the objectives. So we should keep the study objectives in mind, and the results should be linked to that. We can't put anything else here. Okay, it's always important to measure what is the response rate. Mention the response rate. Okay, my sample size was 300 people. Okay, they were around 10% was the non-response rate. Or how many people you approached with the questionnaire, or you asked them to be a part of the study, how many did not give consent. All that should be there. So that's called response rate. Demographic details: how many men, how many women, what was their mean age, what was their educational status. At least some important demographic numbers should be there in your results. The outcome should be expressed both in numbers as well as percentages, and plus whatever appropriate statistical tests that we done, those measures have to be there. Avoid duplication in text and tables. We have tables, we have figures, but use it judiciously. These tables and figures should be labeled properly. There should be an adequate footnote, proper columns, rows, etc. And these should be standalone. They should not be duplication in the text. Same thing you put in the text, same thing we have also put in the table. There's no fun in that. So avoid duplication. Okay, so it's important to be specific here also. Just state the facts, nothing but the facts. Okay, so that's the result section. Then we have discussion, very, very important. We start off with the summary of the main findings of our study. So we have to summarize. This is a study that was carried out to find out this. This is the main finding of our study. What is new in the study? Why is this study important? What are the strengths and limitations of the study? What is new? What is good in the study? What are the limitations? It's always important to know what are the limitations, so that we can improve upon. Other researchers, if they're reading this particular paper, they can learn and they can address those limitations in their study. How does it compare to the previous literature? I did this study, this is the finding that I got. How does it compare to another study that was carried out elsewhere? We need to speculate here whenever needed. Okay, if I have got a different result when compared to another study, why is it so? We need to find out what, or we need to tell what exactly is the reason. What is the implication of this particular research on the policy or in the overall, society? What implications it is likely to have? How we should plan the future research on this particular topic? What is the scope for future research? Maybe our study was quite small, so we may need more large scale studies. So that is something that we need to highlight in the discussion. So discussion again requires careful drafting. So we need to summarize, tell the readers what is new, why is this study important, what are the strengths, what are the limitations, how does it compare with the previous literature. We need to speculate or justify as and when required, and what are the implications on the policy as well as on the guidelines, on the evidence, existing evidence, how it is likely to have an important bearing, and what should future research concentrate on. All this has to be described in the discussion. So it's a very, very important section wherein we make sense of the results and we interpret it, we summarize, and we highlight the strengths as well as limitations of this study. And then we have conclusion, which is always based on the study findings. So it should be linked with the objectives. Cannot write something else that is not a part of my result or not a part of my objective. So it should always be linked with the objectives. Very, very important. So then we select a title. So after doing all this, working on the introduction, materials and methods, result, discussion, conclusion, then we sit with our colleagues and we select the title. So title selection is also important because this is the first chance to catch the reader's attention. Try for the hook. We need to market ultimately. Okay, having said that, we need to give important information in the title as well. It is better that the study design is the part of the title. A cross-sectional study to find out the prevalence of depression among medical students in a medical college setting in Karnataka, or a qualitative study to understand the reasons for substance abuse among adolescents in a rural area in Karnataka. So the study design may have to be mentioned here as per the guidelines. So this is one example for a title. This is a very conventional title, very straightforward way I put it. Assessment of knowledge of obstetric danger signs among pregnant women attending a teaching hospital, a cross-sectional study from Mangalore, Karnataka. So this tells us what is the topic about. It's about finding out the prevalence or what knowledge of pregnant women have with reference to danger signs of pregnancy. Okay, and it also tells us what kind of study it is, cross-sectional study. It also tells us where it is conducted, who is the study population, pregnant women seeking health care. So all this information has to be there. So this is a conventional way of doing it, but there are unconventional ways if we want to catch the reader's attention. For example, you can see here this particular title, scanty AFB smears, what's in a name. It's a very fancy title. Okay, HIV associated TB epidemic, when will we act? Again, it's a fancy title. Okay, so we need to be careful here again. It's better we consult the other team members, take their consensus, and then draft a title. It should be catchy, it should arouse interest in the readers, but having said that, it should also give them what is the research question, what we are doing in this particular study. Okay, when we submit a manuscript to a journal, there's something called title page, and there is a body of the manuscript which is anonymous. The body of the manuscript in any good journal should be anonymous. Here in the title page, we write the title, who are the authors, various authors, whoever has contributed to the study. We need to give credit to them. Okay. Corresponding author, who is the corresponding author who will communicate with the journal, whom the journal will write to. Okay. What is the word count of the article, references, tables and figures, how many tables are there, how many figures are there, what are the keywords. Here we need to look into PubMed, something called medical subject headings, and select the appropriate keywords. And it's also important to have a short and running title, a short form of the main title of the study. So this is the title page, which should be complete in all aspects. All these details have to be there. Many of the other journals have their own format. You can look into it. Then we have an abstract. In the main body of the manuscript, there should be an abstract. Abstract, even though it is before the main paper, it is written after the paper is completed. Only when we complete the paper, we get to know what are the main findings, and only the main points have to be there in the abstract. Abstract could be either structured or unstructured. Structured as in introduction, objectives, materials and methods, result, and conclusion. So what are the main points have to be there. Usually it's either 250 words or 300 words depending on the journal. The word count depends on the journal. Reflect the study findings fairly. Do not repeat the statements again and again from the full articles. Okay, be as specific as possible, market it. It should be attractive, it should be interesting, because many people, when they are going through voluminous data online, they may read only abstract. Most people may only read the abstract. Many of the reviewers, unfortunately, because they may have time constraints, they may just only read the abstract and then say, okay, isko kinare karo, this is not good, or this is very good, let's take it forward, and then review the entire article. That's how it is. So we should ensure that the study findings are reflected fairly. And after the conclusion or discussion section, there are few other things that we need to mention. Acknowledgements. Somebody else who have not contributed significantly to the research, who cannot be listed as authors, but still we want to acknowledge them. It could be the study participants, or it could be somebody who has supported us, or some administrator. We can acknowledge them. Funding. Have we received any funding? Is there any source of funding for this study? Conflict of interest. Do we have any conflict of interest involved in this publication? How have the various authors contributed, or author contributions plus references, which I've already told you. So when we look at author contributions, so we should say who has helped in conceiving and designing the experiments. You can see that all these authors, these are short forms for the various authors, they have all conceived and designed the experiments. Who have performed the study or performed the experiments, that has to be mentioned. Who has analyzed the data, that has to be mentioned. Who wrote the paper finally, that has to be mentioned. Who provided comments and improvised the manuscript, that has to be mentioned. So whoever we list as authors, we need to justify their contribution. What happens, unfortunately, we try to please our seniors, we try to please our leaders or administrators, and we give them gift authorship. That's highly unethical. Everybody who has contributed, and in a significant way in one of these headings, only those can be listed as authors. Others, we can put them under acknowledgement. So it's very important to carefully decide who are our authors. And then comes references. I've told you that there are different references. Here, when we are doing a publication, when we are drafting a manuscript, we need to limit the references only to the recent ones. Cite fairly. Do not cite if you have not read that article. This is a mistake that we do. Read it in detail. Check the journal style. What style? Many journals have their own style, so we need to tailor or modify our referencing to that particular style. And keep a copy of all the references. Save it in your desktop or save it in your folder. Okay, anytime you should be able to refer them. So this is about references in a manuscript. And we also have some reporting guidelines. So I advise you to look at these checklists. There's something called STROPE checklist, that is strengthening the reporting of observational studies in epidemiology, which holds good for all observational studies like case control, cross-sectional, cohort studies. So if you look at this checklist, it tells us how we are supposed to draft a manuscript of a study which falls under the observational category. Then we have consort guidelines, that is consolidated standards of reporting trials. For randomized control trials, when we report it, when we make a paper out of it, when we send it to a journal, it should adhere to the consort checklist. So please go through it. It's available. You Google it, you get it. You get this information. For any qualitative study, we need to adhere to something called correct guidelines, consolidated criteria for reporting qualitative research. It's very important to look at these checklists and guidelines and prepare our manuscript accordingly. Otherwise, if we do it in our own way, there's a chance that it may get rejected. Now comes, what do we need to do to get funding? Okay, what are the various opportunities an undergraduate medical student in India has in terms of research funding? We have something called ICMR short-term studentship. I'm sure many of you have heard of it. So once a year, ICMR calls for applications. There are some thrust areas that have been mentioned. So a student interested to do research can approach a guide who is a permanent faculty member, not a tutor. Above a tutor's rank, it could be a lecturer, assistant professor, associate professor, professor, HOD, anybody above a tutor can be a guide that particular student. The student has to apply, send an abstract, send a synopsis or protocol. That protocol gets reviewed by experts in ICMR, and if it is selected, they get funding to do research. The amount is 20,000. So once selected, the student is given some time, maybe 5 months, to complete the research, and then upload the report into the ICMR portal or website. And once the report is accepted, they get the money, 20,000. So that is ICMR short-term studentship. I'm happy to say that in my institution where I work, at least 60 to 70 students every year, they apply for this. Maybe around 10% or 15% of them get through. But whoever doesn't get through, we have an opportunity for them. Also, we have a seed grant in our university, wherein if a student is interested, he can apply for this. Who has been rejected in the ICMR short-term studentship can apply for this, and again it's reviewed by a committee at the institutional level. If it is found to be suitable, these projects are funded. We also have funding for postgraduates, that is ICMR MD, MS, DM, MCH level dissertation, and 50,000 rupees is given to carry out postgraduate dissertation. We also have NTEP, that is National TB Elimination Program State Task Force in Karnataka, of course. Postgraduates who do a research or study or dissertation on TB, they are funded. These projects are funded. DBT or Department of Biotechnology also funds, but that is more for postgraduates again. We have various subject associations like the Association of Physicians India, the Research Society for Study of Diabetes in India, like RSSDI, and many more subject associations. What I've mentioned is like the tip of the iceberg. There are many other subject associations which fund postgraduate research. But having said that, funding for undergraduate medical students is still in a nascent stage in India. Yes, of course, we have ICMR, short-term studentship. We have many organizations which may help students to undergo carry out research projects or fund these research projects, but it is still in a nascent stage, and a lot more improvements or progress needs to be done in this regard. Okay, but as a budding doctor, I would urge all of you to please apply for the ICMR short-term studentship under a suitable guide. So if you get it, it is well and good. If you do not get it, you can still complete the research without the funding. Okay, it is very, very important for all students to carry out research, at least one research project during their MBBS. Yes, we may be very busy. We also have, we are burdened with all these subjects, 26 subjects or so many subjects. We need to give exams, we need to give competitive exams. But research is a very important part and parcel of our career. Even those who are going abroad, maybe to UK or USMLE, they ask for research experience. So it's always good if you do research. So some important tips for research: we need to collaborate. It's a team effort. I can't say that, oh, I will do everything in my own way. I'm a one man army. So we need to collaborate. Anything done alone, even personally, those research projects that have undertaken with very less people, they have not been successful. So it's important to collaborate. Take guidance, consult more and more people, plan appropriately, read and refer, read again, refer those documents, refer those literatures, implement, adhere to the timelines. So even if we have everything in on paper, it's like doing a movie, right? When we do a movie, we need to have a script, and we need to translate that script, on paper. Whatever is in paper has to come on the screen, right? So we need to implement it properly, adhere to the timelines. And then it's also important to disseminate the findings, go for a publication or presentation in conferences and academic programs. So to summarize, we have covered all these topics. I understand that it's been very exhaustive. You've spent a lot of time, but please understand that all this was necessary. Why medical research, framing a research question, types of research and study designs, parts of a protocol, principles of data collection, data management, how to disseminate the research findings, and what funding opportunities we have for Indian medical students for research. So these are some references that you may go through, some important books and journals that I have referred while doing this presentation. So we have some documents from WHO as well, which are very, very important. You may go through these references. So I wish all of you a very best. I hope I didn't bore you. I hope I did justice to the topic here. So once again, I would like to thank the organizers for giving me an opportunity. Over to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for accepting our invitation to be the honorable speaker for this session.
Yes, my pleasure. And sorry for overshooting the time.
It's okay, sir. It happens. Like you have covered the entire topic in very less time, so definitely it needs time. So we will do the timestamps after the session so that they can refer it easily. So and it's up to Anjali. She will continue the.
Anjali, you need to unmute, I think.
So sorry. Again, so much thank you, sir, for simplifying whole research map so beautifully. I'm sure those who all have attended this session will fall in love with your teaching, and I'm sure they will definitely be benefited from all those information. And thank you so much, everyone, for attending and joining us for this Sunday morning. And sir, we have few questions and doubts. So the first question is, in India, since Sahab has stopped uploading articles from last December, can you please suggest us some other ways to access good articles?
Sorry, I didn't get that.
Since the Sahab for we accessing the articles for free, no, so it has stopped uploading
Which one?
articles
Which
from
one? Which one has uploaded? I didn't get the name.
Sci-Hub. It is Science
Sci-Hub.
Sci-Hub.
Okay, so you can go through PubMed. So we have this search engine called PubMed. You can go through articles there. Okay. If not, we also have Google Scholar, which has a good amount of articles. So PubMed is one way wherein, if you know how to do a PubMed search based on the
Yes, sir.
keywords, you can go through various videos that are there, how to effectively do a PubMed search, and you can type the keywords, type the various, variables or indicators, and do it very effectively, and you'll be able to get access to the articles, not the full text again, but again the summary of the articles, and some of them may have a freely available full text. So that is one alternative for you to go out there and search medical literature.
Thank you, sir. And I would like to ask you, what, according to you, are some moral values which you wish to highlight for budding student researchers?
Yes, one is to be ethical. Do not falsify at any cost. Okay, it's okay if we do mistakes at any stage, even at my stage. For example, if I, nobody will fire me for incompetence. Okay, but if I'm unethical, if I falsify data, then that is something that is unacceptable. So that's one moral value that all of us need to inculcate. We should not cheat. Okay, it's okay if we are not able to do complete justice. We are all humans at the end of the day, right? So be ethical, be moral. That's one message that I want to give.
Thank you, sir. Last question for the day. Sometimes ethics approval consumes a lot of time. So what can be a solution for that? And can we do some researches which doesn't require ethics or something like that?
Yeah, almost all studies on research, if there's a human participant, it requires ethical clearance. So there's no other shortcut. Even I've had personal experiences where the ethics approval has taken months or 4 months or 5 months. Okay, but we can always request them. We can always talk to the ethics committee members. If they are open to it, we can request them to give us an expedited review. Okay, but yeah, there's no solution as of now. We need to wait for the ethics approval and only then move ahead. So that's why we need to, probably we can be well prepared in the protocol stage itself. We can address all the ethical concerns, consult other people. It could be guides, it could be seniors, it could be our own colleagues. Take opinion from them and make it as complete, as robust as possible. So thereby we may be able to reduce the comments that come from the ethics committee from an ethics point of view.
Thank you, sir.
Yes,
Thank you so much.
Anjali, before proceeding, we have few more questions. So,
Okay.
sir, what is your take on publishing or presenting the negative results? Like, since it is not possible that all studies have positive results, there are sometimes we get negative results. Like, how value or how respect we got when we publish or present negative results in this current situation?
It is very important to highlight negative findings as well. All results need not be favorable. Please go through some material online as well. So there are some papers that say that yes, even if it's negative result, usko publish karo. So there's no hard and fast rule that only favorable outcomes or favorable results have to be reported.
Yes,
So even
sir.
if it's a negative result, we have every right to get it published.
Yes, sir. And during this pandemic lockdown time, there are many online surveys which are
Yes.
conducting. So, like, what is the can you highlight the like the I mean what I say the exact value of the online surveys? I mean,
Online services in manuscript writing, right?
uh,
Yeah, so there are many companies that do this. So it's up to the personal level.
no, sir. Like I'm
Uh,
asking, like, what is the like, I cannot getting the word correctly. Like the value of online surveys. Like since the methodology, like most of them are adopting the online e-survey methodology, right?
okay,
So
okay, okay.
Question.
Online data collection. Yeah, you're talking about online data collection, right? Yes, we can still do it. It's an alternative. In fact, I have done one research during this COVID pandemic where, of course, when I had drafted it, it was more of offline study. But due to COVID, I had to make some modifications, okay, and use online methods like WhatsApp video calls to talk to the participants, okay. And it worked out well, but only issue is connectivity. You know, when you go to the remote areas, it is difficult. And also the participant has to be a computer literate, or at least a mobile phone literate, right, which you may not find in all parts of the country. So there are challenges, but it's an alternative. Okay, in every, see, now we never thought that we could have webinars or online classes so nicely like this, right? So COVID has given us that particular opportunity, has taught us that this online mode is also possible. Similarly, even in research, now many research agencies and many investigators are opting for the online method to do data collection, so that they are safe and even the participants are safe. So it can be adopted, but there are challenges, as I told you: connectivity, computer literacy, smartphone literacy, all these are some issues. But it's an alternative. It's better than nothing during this particular time.
Yes, sir. Sir, and like one more question, like let us say, take an example that I want to publish the summary of this webinar, or like how participants are how engaged with this webinar, or how this webinar has impacted on this participant, like or a summary of workshops which we conducted in our conference, or similar to that. Like, still, is it required ethical approval, or like?
Yes, it is better that when you're publishing it, it's better that you go for an ethics approval.
Sir, if we submit
So
it as an
if you're just concentrating on the summary as such, how I developed this particular webinar, or it is just how I set up this organization which has been carrying out these webinars and how I conceptualized it, then probably it's not required. But if you are using the feedback of your participants, they give feedback to you, right? You have always have a feedback form. If you're using that data in your research, then you need to definitely go for ethical approval.
Okay, so even if you are addressing it as a letter to the editor, also still we need the.
Ideally, yes. Ideally, yes.
Okay, sir. And
Better
sir,
to be safe.
okay, sir. Last question, sir. Like
Sure.
regarding the collaborative research, like there are few institutions where the students are not getting the required support, or they are afraid to approach their uh,
Higher
college,
ups.
and they want to collaborate with other college students. What are the things which we should keep in mind? And even I face it during some of my collaborative research. Other college professors may say that why we need to include them in our study because they are not from our college. So there are very,
Yes.
very less institutions which allow collaborative research. So, like, what are the things which we keep in mind in collaborative research?
Very good question. Very valid. Not just holds good for students, but even for faculty members. Even when we want to collaborate with others, we get the same questions. Oh, why should we involve you? Right? So that is there everywhere. But we need to have a common interest. We need to ensure that the person with whom we are collaborating and we are on the same page. Yes, there may be disagreements. We may not agree on everything, but we should work towards a common goal. And plus, we should be able to convince our administrators, because they are the ones who will give us approval. Either we can go for an MOU or a partnership between the two institutions for this particular research project, or it's always important to ensure that the administrators are kept in the loop. Their consent is very much required. So if they are cooperating, if the administrators give us all the support, okay, then we can surely go for a collaborative research. But we need to ensure that we are on the same page, the person with whom we are collaborating, and we have the same interest, same goal. There could be disagreements, but we should be able to rise above that and work as a team.
Okay. Someone has asked what is eminence-based medicine, but I think it's evidence-based medicine. Is
It
there
is
any?
evidence-based medicine. See, let me take the example of we all know that there are so many drugs for hypertension, right? We have beta blockers, we have calcium channel blockers, AC inhibitors. How do we know that these drugs are effective in lowering the blood pressure? There is evidence. Somebody has carried out a research. Okay, and based on that, we've been able to put that into into a guideline. So that is called evidence-based medicine, wherein we make use of some evidence. It could be research evidence or any guideline that has come up with respect to treating an individual or dealing with a condition, and we make use of that in our daily practice. So that is evidence-based medicine. So our entire treatment decisions that we take, even with respect to COVID or any other disease, should be based on this evidence, or EBM, what we call in short, evidence-based medicine.
Thank you so much, sir. Anjali, please proceed the route up.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much, sir, for such a wonderful session. I really enjoyed it. And thank you so much for turning our Sunday morning so beautiful and so much informative. It was whole revision of a research map. And I hope you will continue delivering us many more lectures. Thank you so much, sir, for your valuable time and so much efforts. Thank you, sir.